Well, hello, folks. Welcome to Radio FM 88. I'm the voice down below there on the totem pole. And the co-host, of course, is in the Northern Hemisphere, so she's sitting right at the very top of us. Interesting guest tonight and this morning for our guys in the UK. And without further ado, passing it straight to Andrena. And I can't stop laughing already before the show started, so I'm looking for everybody to participate in today's show. All right. Andrena. Australia to the UK. Hello.
Hello. Right, I forgot to turn my phone off and I put it on airplane mode and cut everybody out. So just bear with me a second. I just got to take this sound down.
Oh, this is state-of-the-art modern technology, isn't it? Right.
Oh, gosh. Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Dreaming the New Dream, and especially if you're listening to the replay. Today it's our great pleasure to have Steve Judd on the show. So thank you, Steve, and welcome. And thank you again for coming on the show. So we're looking forward to what you have to say today.
Well, I'll try and keep it clean and decent, and I'll try and make people laugh at the same time. I'll try and come across as somewhat intelligent as well.
Oh, well, you do your best.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. So you're in Hampshire, and so really, when you landed on planet Earth, how did you get into astrology, astronomy, and all of these things? What are the stepping stones that have brought you to where you are now?
Three separate occurrences. I left home when I was 15, and the only way you could leave home at 15 in the late 60s was to join the army. So I joined the army.
All right.
And they quickly worked out, after I'd crashed a tank or two, they quickly worked out I wasn't going to be good at modern soldiering. So they ran a lot of intelligence tests on me and found out that I was really good with cipher and coding. I left the army in 1974, 5, 19, so late 74, I left the army. And I went on the Hippie Trail for a year or two, Morocco and all that. And then around 1976, 77, I found an ephemeris. Now, an ephemeris is a timetable of planets' places. I've got one here. No, I can't access it at the moment. Never mind. It's like a bus timetable, and it gives you the position of the planets every day for every year over 100 years. And I looked at all these numbers going down these columns, and I thought, wait a minute, there's patterns there. Oh, I can read those patterns. I realized they made angular relationships. So I thought, that's interesting. That's how I actually got into it. And then in 1980, 81, I read this book about what at the time the author was calling karma and reincarnation, but which I've translated in a more modern way as mission statement, purpose, and reason why you volunteered to come to planet Earth in the first place. And I thought, how does this old boy in New York who's never met me know so much about me, and how can I do it? And that's actually got me into astrology. And whilst I was studying the basics from 77 onwards, I actually properly started doing horoscopes around 1981, 82. I then started it became my only source of income from 99 onwards. But more recently, just in this last 4 or 5 years, I've had one of those life changing moments where you realize that when you've been doing something 40 years, you really get to grips with the core of it. And when I realized that astrology is not an it's got valence and life force, I realized that people don't find astrology. Astrology finds people. And when you realize that there's much more to this than meets the eye. And that changed my whole ideas about life, particularly death, and why we're volunteering to be on planet Earth in the first place. And I incorporate that these days into my readings, and I get pretty good results because most of the time I'm dealing with either people who are interested to learn or like-minded people.
Because I know I read in your bio that you've done like over 30,000 horoscopes. Not too many then.
It's pushing 40,000 now, but then I've been doing readings well over 40 years. I was a ceramic and marble and mosaic tiler, but my knees gave out because, kneeling in wet cement for 15 years does your knees in. And that was 1998. And then I thought, well, how am I going to make money? And I thought, well, the only other thing I can do is astrology. And it was convenient because that was just at the time of the internet revolution. So I got myself an email in 1999, and then I got a website in early 2001. I was one of the very first astrologers to have a website, and it seems like that I was just at the right time. And astrology and the internet were made for each other. Astrology is the second most commonly looked at thing on the internet. And we all know what the first one is, but I'm not going to demean myself by mentioning it. So I happened to be I didn't happen to be. I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. And I count me lucky stars. I realize that's a crass thing to say, but yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to astrology. I wouldn't be where I am today without astrology. I doubt if I'd be alive.
Really? Right. Right. So for people, I mean, I know a lot of people follow their star signs in astrology and the planets and all sorts. So for people that maybe haven't or are new to this sort of thing, where would you start as a beginner's guide?
Well, there's 2 or 3 different options. First of all, let's get one of the fallacies of astrology out of the way. Sun sign astrology columns are not worth the paper they're written on.
No.
They're rubbish. I know because I've written them for a number of different famous astrologers, and it's drivel. Right? If you want to learn astrology thoroughly, properly, there are a number of schools, and there's 1 or 2 particular ones that I recommend, which will thoroughly ground you in astrology over a number of years and make you into a proper astrologer. They will charge you, of course, but it's not excessive, but it's quite dry. There are other systems of learning, such as many astrologers, such as myself, do beginners, intermediate and advanced courses, and Zoom is a wonderful invention.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if you want to teach yourself, which is always the best way because that's the school of hard knocks, there are certain books, especially in this last 10 years, which are designed specifically for the beginners who know nothing. Particularly, I would recommend Astrology Decoded by Sue Fairbrother, F-A-R-E brother. She did the master's degree alongside me, and she deliberately set out to write an easy to understand beginner's guide to astrology, simplifying everything.
Okay.
So, but in the old days, everyone knew their sun sign. Now, a lot of people know their moon sign and their rising sign. And 40 years ago, I was saying, I really want astrology to be taught in schools, because I figured that if astrology were taught in schools, that within 2 generations, we'd see an end to warfare and violence. Now, with the internet, we've got the ability to teach the world astrology, and it's happening. And now, finally, astrology is starting to be taught in certain schools in certain countries, particularly in Montessori and Steiner schools, and not a moment too soon.
No, that is fantastic news, and it'd be nice if they brought in much more other things as well, especially in these times of change, eh?
Yes. To me, astrology and psychology are different sides of the same coin. And through studying astrology and or psychology, you get to know yourself in a way that's different to the way anyone's known themselves so far. It gives a much greater degree of depth, and it makes you realize that actually there's nothing wrong with you, despite everyone telling you that there's loads wrong with you.
Yeah.
And then you gravitate naturally towards like-minded people. And this is the emerging community. You know, the idea of families and groups of friends over the years has been very good for us, but we're outgrowing that now. More and more, I find myself saying to people, you need to find your tribe.
Definitely.
As much as family or friends, because tribe is unconditional. They love you just the way you are.
True.
There's a lot to be said for that, eh?
Definitely.
All right, so I was going to say, because obviously comedy's played a big part of your life. So where is that sort of crept in, if you like, or how did that come about?
Well, this is where what comes first, the chicken or the egg. The nature of my personal horoscope is that I've always been a bit flippant. I've been the enfant terrible of astrology. I've always been the one that takes the mickey, and they've always the what used to be the hierarchy of astrology would always find me a bit irreverent. And then I just thought, well, this is who I am. I'm not going to adjust myself just to make you happy. And my catchphrase on my email now is that negativity can't exist where there's humor, which is a basic fact. So I cultivated this image of my evil twin brother, the caustic astrologer. Now he's retired now. He comes out on average once a year, just when I've had a few beers. But I developed this idea of making people laugh at themselves through their horoscope. Because if you can laugh at yourself, then you're not going to be pompous or arrogant. You're going to be a pretty balanced human being. Conversely, if you can't laugh at yourself, then there's probably something wrong. So
yeah,
that's where it came from. And later on, I'll give you an example of this type of humor when we come to certain sun signs.
Right, that'd be interesting. Because I have seen different things in the past, you know, what each star sign, like the negative or the positive, and you read it and you think, oh, I don't like that.
I just wanted to intervene there for a sec. I just want to say to this guy, look, today's a show about astrology. It's not here to do a chat for someone. That's a special thing. Then you can talk to Steve by email. Yeah.
No, Carol's made a valid point, and she says about when babies come into the world and on the certificate or what have you, they don't put the time of that they were born, and then because that causes when people say, "Well, I don't know what time I was born."
Okay, firstly, most countries in the world do record the time of birth on the birth certificate. America does. Canada does. India does. Many countries in the world record it. Scotland does. England doesn't.
No, quite.
Secondly, with experience and practice, there are ways of working out a birth time without resorting to channeling or dowsing.
Yeah.
There are ways to work out a birth time. Basically, in a nutshell, you set up the horoscope pattern for the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, the end of the day, and all these will give 3 separate patterns, all which have certain personality traits. And then you say to the client, okay, so which of this set of personality traits suits you best? And go and ask your friends, because they'll give you a more honest opinion than you'll be with yourself. And then they come back and go, well, it's definitely that pattern. So straight away, you got the time of birth narrowed down to a few hours each side. And there's other techniques by which you can refine the time of birth. And I've done this successfully with a large number of people, in some cases, normally to within 10 minutes each way, and in some cases down to a minute or 2.
Oh, that's good.
So it can be done.
Yeah, right, okay. But yeah, it would be a good idea if they put it on. Save a lot of, but anyway,
make my life so much easier.
Yeah. Right. So North Node and South Node.
Oh, blimey. Right. Okay. There's a point in the horoscope called the North Node, and the opposite point is the South Node. These were introduced to Western astrology by Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, who on her journeys in India discovered, looking at Vedic astrology, she found this concept of karma and reincarnation as symbolized by the North Node in the horoscope. And she brought it back to the UK and started bringing this idea of karma and reincarnation into Western astrology. And that stuck around until very recently. It's still valid in the eyes of most astrologers. But I've done some work on this. For a start off, I've read the entire writings of Isis Unveiled, both volumes that thick. I've read the whole thing.
Wow.
I'm never going to do that again.
No, I bet.
The idea of the North Node in Vedic astrology and in most forms of Western astrology talks of karma, whereas the ways you influence this, way you behave in this life will influence your next life, or the way you behaved in your last life indicates why you're like this in this life. At the time that I realized astrology was not an it, but it is what I call a she, I realized that there's no such thing as death. It's just a transition of consciousness. You switch dimensions. And I thought, well, if there's no death, then there's life before birth and life after death. Therefore, that knocks the concept of reincarnation firmly on the head. Therefore, karma, as we've been led to believe it, is just yet another religious guilt trip. You must be a good person, otherwise you go to hell. That's what priests have said to us for thousands of years. So instead, I shifted the emphasis from external guilt, blame, or judgment into internal judgment of oneself, and suggested that the North Node in this day and age stands for words like mission statement, purpose, and reason why you volunteered to come to planet Earth in the first place. So to those of you who have a little bit of astrological knowledge, look at the sign of the zodiac and the house of the zodiac that your North Node is in. Find the key words that pertain to that sign and house, and there you'll have the bare bones of why you volunteered to come to this planet in the first place, what your mission statement is. Now, that's my take on it. I might be completely wrong, but I don't think I am.
No. I think you've had a few years of experience, like you say, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. And if I'm deluding myself, I'm happy in my delusions.
And why not? Right. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah. Put your hand up.
Stevie, most people want their charts from time of birth and all that stuff. Recently, my father passed away on the 25th of August, and they actually clocked his time at 4:44. Have you ever done death charts? I mean, that's my statement. That's my question. Is that something that people do? I mean, I'm just throwing it at you. Oh, yeah.
I have purely as a matter of curiosity. I have looked at a few people's moment of death to see if I can see any correlation with their birth time or any significance in the moment of their death. I need to state something quite clearly. You cannot predict one's physical death using astrology. And if you could, you shouldn't. Having studied it for so long, I've got a pretty good idea. I've got 4 or 5 windows ahead of me. 2 have passed, and I've got 3, 4, 5 windows ahead of me where I know I will have a good Passover. But I can see when they'll be, but it doesn't mean that's automatically going to happen. Conversely, there are certain indicators in the chart that denote long life. With about 10 to 15% of my clients, I will say to them, right, you've got old bones. You're going to live a very long time, and you're going to keep your marbles and your mobility till the day you die. But as to the actual forecasting of death, no, you can't. No, because astrology isn't cast in stone. There's nothing written in stone here. There's no destiny. There's no fate. I come fate is much more of an Eastern religious tenet. I come from a Western school, which is based much more around free will and self-determination rather than destiny and predetermination. So, yeah, death to me is, but as I say, death to me is when you die, you just go into the next dimension, and hopefully all your mates who have passed over before are waiting for you, and you've got a big party waiting for you.
Exactly. Definitely.
Okay,
Does that answer your question, Jeffrey?
It does.
To me, death isn't something to be scared of. We've been force-fed this kind of divisive thing around death is the end. It's not. It's just it's the start of the next chapter. I'm not worried about my death. Mortality holds no fear for me. The method of my physical death is a bit, I don't want to be in a hospital bed with pills and tubes. But, but I have no fear of mortality or death.
No, ditto. Yeah, and because I was, my intention to go into my sleep in my own home, not like you say anywhere else.
I have considered bungee jumping or harder day, but sleep would be a good way to do it also.
Doing something like that, you could end up a bit of a come a cropper.
Yeah, but
because I know a lot of people say when you say something, oh, that's their fate, that's in the stars, that's their destiny. So so when you do a chart, if you're starting off from the very beginning, I was going to say the sheep, God. When you start from the beginning, is there like pointers that you give along the way, markers that sort of crossroads that you may come to?
Very much so. Firstly, as I said, there's nothing cast in stone. The horoscope is a blueprint of potential. It shows what your skills are, your gifts, and the opportunities. It also shows what the challenges are. It also shows that if you work with astrology, if you allow astrology to flow with you, through you, in you, then you will naturally pick the best time to do things. Therefore, your life will run more smoothly, easily, and successfully. However, I've known people deliberately choose to do everything the opposite of what astrology says to try and disprove it. And they've been successful in that they've still achieved what they set out to achieve, but it's been a much, much greater struggle than if they had done it at the times that I had suggested they do it. There's one of the oldest tenets of astrology, right up there with as above, so below, is that the planets impel, they don't compel. You don't have to listen to it. You can choose to ignore it if you wish.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. It's like all things, isn't it?
I know what the next question will be from that. You're going to say, well, if the planets impel, then how can I prove that the planets actually influence us?
Well, that could be an interesting question. Go on.
Well, I kind of can. Most of them anyway. We know how the moon influences us. We see what happens to the marine crustaceans with the oysters and the crabs. We know that the moon affects the tides and the ebb and flow of feelings and emotions. It affects the lifestyles of a number of animals on the planet. We know this. It's a scientifically proven fact. We also know that particularly the large gas giant planets, they emit large quantities of radio waves. And it's quite easy to listen to Jupiter, for example, on the shortwave radio. You can hear it. It pulses something like 13 times every 5 minutes, something like that. I've heard it. You can hear the outer planets as well. There are YouTube videos where you can hear the music of the planets. And some of it's really disturbing. But when they're in harmony with each other, when the patterns that the planets are making with each other are harmonious, when they're like in a hexagram, for example, a six-pointed star, the sounds that they make are much more harmonious. Is harmonious or discordant? And the thing is, if these planets are sending out radio waves that we're picking up on our radios, then those radio signals are hitting us as well. Therefore, there will be an effect in some level. Of course, the scientists and the astronomers will go, but it's absolutely minuscule. This can't affect you. And I'm a big fan of homeopathy. The smaller the influence, the stronger the effect sometimes. So I can clearly see how the planets that we can see with the naked eye affect us. Lovely image of the sun. The sun affects us. Without the sun, we'd be dead. You know, it gives us heat and light and life and warmth. But then you'll start asking, well, how does a planet like Pluto, 4 billion miles away, smaller than our moon, how does that affect us? And that's where I start going, well, and that's when I normally start mumbling something about quantum, because I know that Pluto has an incredibly powerful effect on people. I know this to be true. I've got tens of thousands of statistics that prove it and thousands of client assertions. But I cannot prove it in ways that's scientifically acceptable to the astronomers and the mathematicians and the scientists. But then I don't need to prove it. I know it works.
What's that picture of, Jeff? It's a bit black.
It looks like Mercury. It might be Mercury.
Pluto.
That's Neptune. God knows what that is. It might be Mercury.
Oh, they said it was Pluto. There's your Neptune.
But that's definitely Neptune. That's the moon. Yeah. Here's another synchronicity for you. There's a lot of synchronicity in astrology, much more than you might think. That's Mars, Jupiter. No. Here's a lovely synchronicity for you. On average, the moon gets closer to the Earth and further away, as well as going up and down and round. It also gets closer and further. There's a lot of different cycles with the moon. But the moon, and similarly, the Earth's orbit around the sun is not perfectly circular. It's about 1% out of being perfectly circular. So there's an average here which says that the sun is about 360 times the diameter of the moon. But the sun is also 360 times further away from the Earth than the moon. This is accurate to about 1%.
It's amazing.
Right? And if this was not that way, we wouldn't get eclipses. Because when we see a total eclipse of the sun, you can see the whole of the sun is obscured, but you can see the corona around it. Because the full moon is on average exactly the same size as the sun. And if it weren't that accurate with that 360 ratio, we just wouldn't get eclipses. Fascinating way of seeing things.
Well, it is. And it's like you say, they're all millions of miles away, but, you know, they all have an impact some way or another. Sometimes it's like beyond. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. Quantum.
Yeah. My student, I teach a lot of students, and I'm very fond of showing them the geometry of the solar system, because this is a bit of a radical statement. Okay, I can prove using geometry that the distance of the planets from the sun and their orbital rotational speeds is not random. Now, this doesn't suggest that they were placed there or that there's a reason or a cause, but it does suggest there is no randomicity in their placings. Otherwise, the geometry would not be precise. And it is precise, 99%. That 1% can be as much as sort of 500,000 miles with the distances we're talking about, but it's still only 1%. And to me, that just suggests it's easy to say that God doesn't play dice with the universe, but it says to me that there is a sense of order out there. And that order then resonates potentially into our lives as patterns of potential or opportunity or challenge. This goes firmly in the face of conventional orthodox belief systems, dogmas, theologies, religions. And for thousands of years, there's been a vested interest in different types of power bases to attempt to control our belief systems. But to my mind, the original God and the original goddess were always going to be the sun and the moon. Always.
I know a long time ago I did, we were learning about astrology, and she got each one of us to play out a planet. So, you know, somebody was Saturn, somebody was Pluto. And then, you know, for that person, where they were in their charts. And then I can't remember exactly because it's such a long time ago, but like there'd be like, say, Pluto thundering in and banging and crashing and what have you. And then another one. So it was a really good way of showing how they all interact.
Astrodrama is a great therapy because you get 7 or 8 people playing the planets, and they're playing someone else's chart, and they're playing the roles that they see the other person as behaving in through their horoscope. And then the person whose chart it is looking on, and they're either laughing at themselves because they can see themselves in the other people's actions, or more commonly they're going, but I'm not like that at all. At which point everyone else turns around and goes, yes, you bloomin' are.
Yeah. But so, that was a great way of having a better understanding how they play out.
Yeah.
Right, there's so many other questions, because I know you've got a huge following on YouTube, and I know you've done radio and TV appearances, but I'd still like to know a bit about your stand-up comedy. Have you had a natural comedy streak within you since young?
I was described as cheeky when I was very young.
Oh, yeah.
I've always been a bit flippant and a bit lippy. I'm very good at the smart ass one-liners sometimes. I do make people laugh. It's not intentional. I would not describe myself as subtle, sophisticated, diplomatic, or tactful. I would describe myself as very basic and honest. Okay, 2 minutes, all right? 2 minutes. Right. Let's start with the most boring sign of a zodiac.
Watch out, people.
Taurus.
Right.
Okay.
Taurus.
If you want to wind up a Taurus, you just take away their money. Tell them that they're being possessive and greedy. Eat all their food. A Taurus with an empty fridge is a sorry sight. And tell them that they're not worth it. If you want to wind up a Scorpio, then first of all, it's best done on the phone, right? And you tell them the truth that they're crap in bed, and that they use sex as a control mechanism to have power over other people, and that actually they're really paranoid. And then you run quickly. If you want to wind up a Gemini, you corner them at parties so that they can't move and circulate, and then bore them to death with long monologues about your personal problems. And then you give them long, deep, personal, intimate hugs, because Gemini likes hugging for about a second or two, and then they just want to break free. If you want to wind up a Sagittarius, you point out the lack of realism in their philosophies. You laugh more than they do, you travel more than they do, and you wear longer, baggier sweaters than they do, because most Sagittarians like those sweaters that come down to the knees. If you want to wind up a Cancer, you could dice with death and insult their mother, but that's dangerous. Alternatively, go into the kitchen and go, oh, that's really nice. And then go, wait a minute. Ugh, dust. Because Cancers love their kitchens. They're very sensitive and moody about the kitchens. If you want to wind up a Capricorn, you first of all, you tell them they're not working hard enough. and then you force them to sit still and say, no, you sit still and relax. We'll do everything. Because Capricorn cannot sit still when everyone else is working. They need 2 weeks practice to go on holiday. They can't stop working. If you're going to wind up in Aquarius, tell them that they're completely unemotional. They're really from Sirius C. They're robots powered by AI. And then you take away their crystals. The caustic astrologer was born at a big psychic fair in Minehead when I was suddenly, someone cancelled at the last minute. I was suddenly pushed on stage in front of 1,000 drunks, parties, girls from Newcastle who were on a hen night with Stetsons, and it was just it was a rough crowd. And after talking normal astrology for a couple of minutes, I realized this wasn't going to work. So I started insulting them. And the one that really got them going is when I said to Leos, I said, look, Leos are fine. Shame about their ugly children. Right? At which point all the tomatoes and the beer started getting thrown.
I bet.
If you want to wind up a Pisces, tell them that, for God's sake, will you just stop feeling so damn sorry for yourself? Right? Because they're the world's best at whinging and self-pity. And then take their alcohol away. If you want to wind up a Virgo, stand next to them on an underground tube train and just waft your underarm smell at them, because Virgos don't mind what you look like, but body smells, no. And they don't do biscuits in the bedroom. And if you really want to wind up a Virgo, go into their bathroom when they're not there and move everything 1 inch to the left.
Yeah.
If you want to wind up a Libra, you make them decide everything. Right? Where should we go? What shall we do? What shall I think, dear? And then act crude and unsophisticated, because Libras like to think they're so sophisticated. So take them to a punk rock gig or Tchaikovsky, something loud. And the best one of all is when I do this when I'm dealing with a bunch of drunks. You go, right, any Aries here? And they all go, yeah, me, look at me. I'm an Aries. And you go, right, let's move on. And you ignore them. You completely ignore them, or be kind to their enemies, or forget to introduce them at parties. All right. Now, all of this is just silly humor. It does make other people laugh, and there is a core element of truth in this. But the thing behind this is to make people laugh at themselves. Because if you can laugh at yourself, you're balanced, normal, stable. And if you can't laugh at yourself, lighten up.
Very good. How to make friends and find a few enemies, eh?
I'm doing it with love.
I know. And with all what's happened over the last few years, now more than ever in these challenging times, we're all shifting and moving and what have you. We need much more fun and laughter. And we always say we act our shoe size, which is size 5, and we have fun with a capital F, because it's so important.
Well, laughter releases endorphins into the bloodstream, right? And it is my experience that people who laugh lots generally live longer.
Yeah. And
they generally have a lot more fun. And at heart, we are playful animals. We are playful. It doesn't matter how much money you got, how successful you are. If you're not having fun.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's our motto, is to bring in the fun, the laughter every day. It's just find little silly things that make you laugh, and it's have a chuckle. I mean, once I start laughing, and if I'm out with my sister and we get the giggles, that's it. We're uncontrollable, but our sides are hurting, but that's what it's all about. It's just seeing the fun side of things.
Hey, when you were talking about the Pisceans, I actually thought you were describing all the English.
Jeffrey, excuse me?
Yeah, I missed that. Say that again, Jeffrey.
Well, when you're talking about the Pisceans,
it
sounded like you were talking about every Englishman. So my question is, does every country have its own star sign?
Now, I have got a riposte to that. I have got a way of working that one. It's moderately offensive. There is a point in the horoscope that's called the ascendant or the rising sign, okay? And it's actually the part of the sun's orbit, one of the 12 signs of the zodiac, that is rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth. If you're born on the equator or between the tropics, each sign of the zodiac comes up on the horizon approximately every 2 hours. But the further north or the further south of the equator you're born, that difference gets more notable because the Earth is not on a permanent north-south axis. The Earth is tilted at 23 degrees. So in the northern hemisphere, you have signs like, for example, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, which are much more common as someone's ascendant. One in 8 people in the UK or North America will have Virgo or Libra rising. Whereas in the southern hemisphere, it's much more common to find people with Aquarius, Pisces, or Aries rising. Now, the standard jokes on this are that, yeah, okay, many people in Britain have got Virgo rising, whereas Virgo is known as being, Virgo rising people are very fussy, very analytical, and at times they can be somewhat anal, right? So there's a lot of jokes about the British as being sort of very squeaky bottomed and tight and controlled. Whereas the alternative is in Australia, you've got a lot of Pisces rising, alcoholics, and a lot of Aries rising, head first, jump in head first, bang your head, and then learn by your mistakes. Now, I'm not suggesting that any particular nation's people fit these stereotypes. But I've done the astrology of cars.
Have you?
You know, like Aries, well, doesn't matter what car they drive as long as it's red. Scorpio likes tinted windows. Virgos like cars that have got plenty of room and are easily cleaned. Leos like cars with big boots so you can fit all the children in. You know, there's lots of things you can do with this, but it's all based on there's an element of factuality about all this. It does make sense when you explore the archetypes.
Hmm.
Oh, I got another question then.
Go on then.
You know how we talk about star signs and then they're linked to their constellations?
Yeah.
How come you never see Earth linked into its own constellation as well? Why isn't, everybody else?
Because we're standing on the Earth and we're looking out into the cosmos. You know, in the old days, 300 years ago, they would burn people on the stake for suggesting that the sun was the center of the solar system. And 300 years ago, they were insisting that everything spun around the Earth. Now we know this not to be true. There's also this ongoing question about why the signs of the zodiac don't relate anymore to the constellations of them in the sky. And there is a good answer to that. 2,200, 2,300 years ago, the signs of the zodiac related to the constellations in the sky. But as the solar system slowly orbits around the galactic center, so our perception of the stars changes very, very slowly by 1 degree every 72 years. So in the course of our lifetime, a constellation will shift like that, just a little bit. But over a 2,000-year cycle, that constellation will shift like that, which is why now, 2,200 years ago, you'd have looked at the constellation of Gemini and you'd see the stars that make up Gemini. Now, if you look at the stars of Gemini, the constellation of Gemini, you're actually looking at the astrological sign of Cancer. It's all shifted 30 degrees. This is the difference between Vedic, Eastern astrology, and Western astrology. Western astrology starts the horoscope at 0 degrees of Aries, when the Earth is perfectly perpendicular to its axis, when there's exactly 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime everywhere on the world, the vernal or the spring equinox. That is the start of 0 degrees of Aries. And the 12 signs come from that point. When I was a kid, the spring equinox was on March the 20th or March the 21st. Now it's on March the 22nd. Similarly, winter solstice always used to be the 20th or the 21st of December. Now it's normally the 21st or quite commonly the 22nd. Things are moving very slowly. Over a lifetime, we don't see it. But over 100, 10 or 20 lifetimes, you really do see it.
Because we have got one coming up next week, haven't we? Well, like you say, I always thought it was the 20th, 21st, but now over the years, it's round about the 22nd, isn't it?
Yeah. And personally, I like the winter solstice more than the summer solstice. I'm a long-term veteran of the Stonehenge festivals of the 70s and 80s. And these days I get really disappointed when I see lots of sort of culture tourists descending on Stonehenge, 50,000 people at summer solstice and bands playing and people just generally not being in touch with the real reason why they're there. Whereas winter solstice, you'll get 200 or 300 people. And they're the hardcore, they're the tribe. And they're the people who know what they're there for, because the old stone circles, the old sacred monuments, most of them, if not all of them, are set up to patterns in the sky as they were at the time that those monuments were built. I'm fortunate enough to live in a country where there's more stone circles than any other country in the world.
Yeah, that's true.
So I have been to many of them. I love them.
Yeah, no, ditto. So with like events that we've had recently over the last few years, can you, when you're doing your charts, do you see the different things that are coming up and the ripple effects?
Right. I've just republished this, okay? The Law of Pluto. Now, I originally wrote this in 2014. And in 2014, I wrote this. Listen to this. This is half a paragraph. When the exponential graph curve of evolution reaches prime vertical, and by exponential graph curve, when I was born, there was 2 billion people. There's now 8. When I was born, spirituality was Sunday school. Now it's everywhere. When I was born, technology was a dial-up phone, and now I'm downloading the Zoom app and speaking to you from Australia, blah, blah. When the exponential graph curve of evolution reaches prime vertical, one of only 2 things can happen. Either the pace of acceleration becomes unsustainable, the pathway of the exponential curve turns in on itself, resulting in a sudden crash, and perhaps the whole process beginning again, this time in the opposite direction to the past. In this eventuality, a dystopian future of a soulless population living on processed food, chemical drugs, antibiotics, and endless superficial media in an increasingly polluted environment will only lead to a mass pandemic. Now, I wrote that in 2014. I also gave the alternative way of seeing this, which leads to a greater symbiosis with the earth and an advancement into the emerging soft technology in a way that embodies spirituality and requires more holistic attitudes and a willingness to allow the conscious and the unconscious sides of our nature to combine. I wrote this in 2014. The conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto in the sky in December 2020 was very much the harbinger of the pandemic. But that was only a taste of what's to come. I'm going to be deadly serious now.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
in the next 3 years, Pluto is going to leave Capricorn and move into Aquarius. Uranus will leave Taurus and move into Gemini. And both Saturn and Neptune together will leave Pisces and move into Aries. All of the 4 outer planets will move from the feminine into the masculine signs. All of them will be at the start of a new sign. This has never, ever happened before. I've gone back 10,000 years and never seen anything like this. And even then, the outer planets weren't discovered. So the archetypes we work with today weren't known about them. This is perhaps, from an astrological perspective, the single most concentrated period of compressed change in human history. And the negative way of looking at this suggests a pandemic which makes COVID look like nothing. And the devolution into some type of automaton or mechanist world where we become kind of cyborgs, where we adjust our DNA to cope with the environmental pollution. And this is a horrible idea, but it's the negative way of looking at it. The alternative positive is that we're going to take all of this feminine energy of the last 20 years, this surge in words like compassion, kindness, and spirituality, and take it out into the world and make it the mainstream. We're all going to become naturally more empathic, intuitive, sensitive, whilst retaining our identity and individuality. And we'll just know when someone around us is harboring bad thoughts or about to commit an act of violence. And this is the type of future that I'm trying to dream in for myself and to generate for other people. Because by doing that, we'll get out of this 3-dimensional well, start expanding our consciousness. We only use 23% of our brain when we're awake. The rest is waiting for us to use it. And once we do that, we're going to realize that there's a lot more out there waiting for us than we've previously thought possible. It's an incredible time to be alive. I'm really privileged to be alive at this time. So yeah, get your surfboard and this is not about going with the flow, because that's easy.
Yeah, true.
This is about flowing with the go.
Yeah, I like that.
Current and deliberately working with it.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And we signed up for this, like, to be here in the greatest time of history.
Yes.
And even though sometimes you think, I never signed up for this.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And the horoscope serves as a tool to help you wake up and remember why you came here in the first place.
Amazing.
And I wouldn't describe myself as racist, but I do differentiate these days more and more between human beings and humans being. Okay, there's a consciousness implied with humans being, whereas human beings, they just want their processed food, their 9-to-5 job, their 2.2 kids mortgage, their Netflix. They want it all on a plate. They don't want to have to work for it. But evolution is not something that happens to you. You have to reach out for it and work with it. You have to strive. And that's important.
Totally. So,
excuse me, I've been ranting.
No, it's good for you to rant. You get it out. You get it out the system.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, totally, Katie. So, so you've enlightened a lot of people and given people a better understanding. So, is there any sort of words of wisdom? I mean, I know that people, and I don't know if that's still the case, you used to be able to download, I think it was Astro Dents or Dienst or something.
Yeah.
And get a chart. I mean, do you still recommend for people that got no idea to just download that and just see where they're at?
There's lots of free resources out there.
What would you recommend?
Astro Dents is a great one. You can download your horoscope. You can punch in your date, time, place of birth and get a free horoscope. And it will give you a kind of very generalized free reading on a computer printout. There's also a great website called Cafe Astrology, which is just ram-packed full of different types of descriptions of various parts of your horoscope. There's so many different resources out there. I really like Cafe Astrology.
So how are you spelling that? Is that with a C or a K?
C. Two words. CAFE Astrology. I don't know the people who run it. I have no connection with it at all. It's just a brilliant resource.
All right, we'll have a look at that later then.
They've done the world a big favor there.
Yeah, yeah. So any words of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
Huh.
In the nicest possible way, please.
Well, he's got something coming up in a couple of weeks, haven't you? Didn't you want to?
You're right. I have. It's. Yeah. I've mentioned it once online so far, and I've half sold out already. I'm doing a weekend teaching live in South London, where I'm doing 6 hours of teaching each day and providing people with a really great vegetarian meal, Indian meal, and lots of teas, coffees, and biscuits. And I'm doing it because I love teaching. And then if that works, and it should, I started doing this before the pandemic, but now I'm rekindling it. I'm going to take it out of London, and certainly I've got the potential to do it in Edinburgh and Bristol. And if it does work, I am going to take this abroad.
Brilliant.
Because I really want to. It's not an astrology roadshow, but it is the idea of taking astrology out into the world. And I've got enough. I think I've got enough clients and interested people so that I can cover my costs, which is all I really want.
You'd be good in Glastonbury to do that as well.
Yeah. Glastonbury.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, once you get through everyone called Merlin and Guinevere, yeah. I'm being facetious. I love Glastonbury. I've got a lot of friends there, but it is a kind of microcosm of the world. You know, I had a dream long ago about Glastonbury. I was flying high over Glastonbury, and I looked down, and all I saw was this beautiful, white, expansive, glowing, vibrant light coming from Glastonbury. And then I looked deep into that white light, and I saw there were little specks of black. Because wherever you are, wherever there's light, there's dark. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a big problem with light workers. All these people who preach love and light. If you can't work with the dark, don't work with the light. Dark isn't negative. It's just dark. Whom I work particularly with Pluto, I encourage my clients to go into the caves at the bottom of the soul. I encourage them to deal with fear, terror, phobia, paranoia, to deal with it, let it out, release it, purge it, cleanse it. And then you become more psychologically stable, more psychologically integrated. And then you realize that dark and light are just equal sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like your shadow side, isn't it?
You can't work with shadow, don't work with light.
Yeah.
Otherwise you become imbalanced. And most of these so-called light workers have all got dirty socks under the bed somewhere, or something like that. You know, there's always a shadow somewhere. So I'm a bit skeptical about the holier than thou brigade. I have my shadow side, I have my dark side, and I love it. I'm not corrupt much. I'm certainly not a nasty person. I've never done anything to actively hurt anyone in my life. And I hope I never will. But if you can't deal with the difficult stuff inside yourself, then you're in denial.
Mm. But in this day and age, you need, whatever's coming up, you can't push it to one side anymore. It'll keep coming up until you deal with it, won't it?
And this influence is only going to get stronger and stronger over the coming few years. Yeah. There's so much knowledge, wisdom, information out there now that it's almost like a tidal wave. It's like I say, it's the acceleration of evolution. It's going to happen. It's just a question of whether we go with it willingly or kicking and screaming. And many people will go with it kicking and screaming because they'll suddenly realize but they can't have all their chemical medicines because the drug trade will gradually fade away, and that they can't have all of their benefits because the system is inherently fragile. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult transition for a hell of a lot of people, especially those who have got a vested interest in greed and profit. But this is representative of the last 2,000 years. We are literally now moving into the age of Aquarius. And if you burst into song, I will walk away, right? But it is happening. We're changing our consciousness. And not a moment too soon, to quote Terence McKenna.
No, I agree totally. So what date is your course, and is it on your website? So how many people are you looking to have on that?
Oh, that one, the live one, that's just sort of 60 people, 70 people in a restaurant. But every year I do about 30 weeks of teaching online. I do 3 beginners modules, one on the signs of the zodiac, one on the planets of the zodiac, one on the aspects of the zodiac. And then I do an intermediate module where I look at astro mapping, relationships, the asteroids. And then I do an advanced module where I look at forecasting techniques, the influences of planets in the sky, like the Saturn return or things like this. I talk about how to actually use astrology at the day-by-day level. And I do this every year. And the next course is going to be starting on the end of February. All the details are on one of my websites. They're on my teaching website, which is Astrobabble Productions. Yay, Astrobabble Productions.
I like the babble.
Well, that's what I do. I babble on about astrology. It's my modus operandi. I babble. I talk astrology. Astrology talks through me. You know, she's got me. She's not letting go of me. Once you learn astrology, you can never unlearn it. So once she's got you, she's got you.
Right. So there were a few questions. So Carol's written, some leaders are attempting to lead us into the age of Scarius, never mind Aquarius.
Well, that's because they have a vested interest in remaining in power.
Indeed.
Doesn't matter whether they're politicians or industrialists or priests. You know, they don't want to lose their power. We're becoming more self-empowered.
But everything's being uncovered, isn't it? You know, you're watching more and more, you know, which is fantastic. It's a long time. Right. Somebody said, I want to sign up for that one, but got no email reply.
That's the thing in South London. That's because I've got so many people, and I'm going to reply to those emails in the next 36 hours, all of them.
All right. Well, there you go then. Anything else, Jeff? I saw quite a few. Oh yeah, there's a nice picture of you with Jonathan Kane. This passed on. Yeah. I used to love his horoscope. Always, that was the first thing I looked for when I saw paper. Never bought the paper, but I read the horoscope.
Yeah, I'm deliberately not going to be any ruder than I've already been about certain elements of the British media because
no, best not.
No point.
No. Right. Okay. Anything else you'd like to finish up on?
Ask yourselves, folks, if you're watching this show or you're listening to this show, then you're already questioning the world you live in and the reality you live in. Keep questioning. It's not about that. You're not being asked to be successful. You're not being asked to find answers. You're being asked to be on the road and to do your best. And the only one who can tell you what your best is you. You are judge, jury, and executioner. And if you know you're doing your best in whatever you're doing, and anyone else has the nerve to criticize, you can just say, look, I'm doing my best. There's the door. You can leave.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, you're only accountable to yourself. There's no judgment here. And that's the beauty of astrology. It is an objective impersonal way of reflecting on oneself. It's a great tool for personal self-analysis, and it's a great tool for being able to maximize the best potentials of yourself at the best times. That's how once every 12 years, there'll be anywhere from a 7 to 12 month period, which will be the best time for 12 years for things like renovation, redecoration, extension, conversion, or relocation. And I've helped a number of clients with picking the best time to move. And you can even put your horoscope on a map of the world and find the best place to move to, either globally or in a small locality. There is a well-established technique for advising clients on the best time to try and conceive children. It's a well-proven technique. If you look at the woman's chart and work out where the sun and moon was and the angle between them at the moment the woman was born, then that angle will repeat itself between the sun and moon once a month. And that at that time, there is a 10 to 15% better than average chance of conception than most other times. This has been particularly helpful with clients who are using IVF, sorry.
Yeah, interesting.
There's so many different facets here.
Yeah.
And, we've not touched the surface. For example, there are astrologers, there are astrological students in the British Houses of Parliament. There are MPs who have got astrological software who use it all the time. In Britain, there's been an astrologer in the royal court since at least 800 AD, apart from about an 80-year period in the 1700s. It's everywhere. Even JP Morgan said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. It's everywhere, but it's under the scenes because, of course, no one believes in astrology. It's a fool's game.
Hey, brother, throwing the curve one. What about the 13 star signs? How does that come
Right. Tell you what that is. When you trace the pathway of the sun around the sky, because we go around the sun, it appears to us that the sun appears to be in different constellations over the course of a year. Those constellations are man-made. They're the stars in the sky, which thousands of years ago, astronomers put borders on those constellations, said, right, that's the constellation of Cancer, that's the constellation of Gemini, blah, blah. As those constellations have moved very slowly over 2,000 years, what was 12 is now 13. Because now there's a 13th constellation called Ophiuchus, which is on this pathway of the sun. It's called the ecliptic. And therefore, the sun is actually in this 13th sign, Ophiuchus, for about 3 days a year. And in 100 years' time, it'll be 4 days a year. And in 1,000 years' time, it'll be 9 days a year. Whether we're still here by then. It doesn't change the fact that astrology is so ingrained. I can trace astrology. The earliest evidence of astrology goes back to about 6,000 BC.
Really? Gosh.
In Sumeria. But to me, astrology started when a hominid got off its knuckles in the East African plains and looked up at the sky at night and went, oh, wow, those things are moving. Wow. What's that? Let's make stories. Let's make myth. So astrology survived every culture, every religion, every government. Astrology is older than them all. And that's why I say if astrology were taught in schools, within 2 years, we'd have a unified global community with no warfare.
And what a difference that would make, eh?
Oh, Ronald Reagan used to have his wife, didn't it? Nancy used to tell him what to do.
Well, I think that if we were to have that, we'd find that all of a sudden there's a much bigger galactic community waiting to welcome us.
Definitely.
But I don't want to get into that because at the moment
No.
that's conveniently unprovable.
Right. Somebody's Space Monk has asked, can you find the correct chart? Is birth time is unknown? Oh,
Yeah,
we've already done that.
I explained earlier about how you can actually work out a time of birth. It involves a lot of personal questions. Here's one. What is the aspect that signifies the best time in that 12-year period to make a move? It's when Jupiter moves into the 4th house of your horoscope, for those of you that are astrologically minded.
Very good.
Right. Okay. Well,
all right.
I think
that's
I need a coffee.
Fantastic. Yeah, ditto. That's been fantastic, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge. I mean, yeah, absolutely stunning. So thank you for being our guest this week.
Been my absolute pleasure. Let's do this again in a year or two.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. Because yeah. So all right,
I only remembered a couple of days ago that Jeffrey said to me, "Oh, we have met before. We met at shows, decades ago." And I'm like, "Oh, that's when I was cutting my teeth. That's when I was going around the country just doing readings and trying to scrape a living."
Yeah.
But yeah, things are different now. But then,
Yeah, I can remember you there as well. Now that Jeff had reminded me, but yeah, I remember you because that was going back years ago. But anyway, time.
Well, I was the MC and the roadie, the DJ, for those 4-day events, and of course the program guide indicated there's this guy called Steve Judd, and he came up and we hit it off really well. It was just a great sense of humor, just.
Well, I don't know who he was, but he obviously had something going for him, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my evil twin brother. But hey, I've integrated him a lot more now. We're now unified.
Oh, that's nice to know. All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everybody that's tuned in this week or listening to the replay. And it's same time, same place next week.
Yeah. All right. Stand by. I'll just get off here. Got an Israel. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.